Okay.
Well,
Okay.
the
Okay.
second thing is I am using historically reasonable owner earnings.
Describe.
Oh, excuse me, owner earnings. I'm using historically reasonable operating cash flow.
Oh. Okay. Describe.
Okay. That means that when you're looking at a business numbers over time, let's say operating cash flow, which is the first major line on a cash flow statement is summarized as operating cash flow. And then the second major chunk is investing cash flow. And the third major chunk is financing cash flow. And those things all produce your actual cash numbers coming through your company. The one we're most concerned with here is operating cash flow. And that will be a number that you can look at across time. Like if you were to go over to our toolbox, you would see it across time, or any place that consolidates data on companies, consolidates their financial statements, you'll be able to see years of operating cash flow numbers.
Yes.
One after the other. And what you want to see is that you're not using an outlier as a starting point for figuring out the 10 cap. In other words, companies can have really astonishingly good years for a reason that has nothing to do with them. They're not going to really be growing that fast.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying essentially create yourself a nice windage operating cash flow number to use
windage
in the 10
operating
cap.
cash flow. Thank you. Windage operating cash flow.
Yeah.
So you want to just, make sure that it's in a consistently predictable line of numbers that you would be willing to say, yeah, I'm really confident that this is a reasonable cash flow, operating cash flow for the company at that point in time.
Yeah, like it's not like been a crazy year, and so
not been a super crazy year,
or worse or better.
I'm not too worried about it if it's been a crappy year, because that's only going to make you more conservative.
That's true.
But if it's been a really good year, you might be overpricing the company a tad.
I thought that when you said historically reasonable, I thought you meant something like to do with like 1986 and how there was no cash flow statements back in the day or something like that.
No.
Okay.
Just that it looks like it's probably right about where they should be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? And if it isn't, you can adjust it. If it's lower than where they should be, great. Run a 10 cap on that, and maybe you can buy the company at that price. But you really kind of want to make sure it's ballparkish normal and run it from there.
So these are really steps rather than, or this one anyway, is kind of just a step rather than a checklist item.
I don't know. I call it a checklist item. I'm checking that box, but it is a step that you would take.
All right.
All right.
The third one, your checklist. Okay, go ahead. Third one.
Thank you. Is I've calculated using historically reasonable maintenance capital expenditures. So I want to look at the 10K here, and I'm going to type into the 10K capital expenditures right there on that little slot where you can type in words and it goes and finds them in the 10K.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna do that, and it'll bring me to everywhere in the 10K it talks about capitalization, and one of those sections, typically the investing portion, the investing notes in the cash flow section, will discuss what they spend on capital expenditures last year and may predict what they'll spend next year. Right? That's pretty typical. What you're hoping for is they also discuss the breakout between what portion of that is maintaining the company and what portion is for growing the company. So many companies don't split that out.
I have almost never found that. It's really annoying.
So guess what? We have an answer for you now. After a lot of research on this from Dr. Andy Bargerstock, and also from Andy Harriton, our other CPA, who's our chief compliance officer, they've concluded that across all the companies that they've studied, the range of percentage of capital expenditures that is maintenance runs from 20 to 80%. Almost no companies have 100% maintenance capital expenditures. Almost everybody has some growth capital expenditures.
Yeah.
And on average, we're going to default the toolbox in the new iteration in the toolbox. We're going to default it to 50% of capital expenditure is maintenance. So if you don't have any information, if I don't have any information in the 10K otherwise, and I can't figure it out from anything I know about the company, then I'm going to default, unless it's a railroad or something where it's obviously chewing up a huge amount of capital expenditure to just maintain the thing, I'm going to default to 50%. Okay, so if Chipotle Mexican Grill shows $200 million of capital expenditures, which is a line item just below operating cash flow, you open up investing, or you look in the investing cash flow section of the cash flow statement, and there'll be a line that says capital expenditures, or it'll say purchase of property and equipment. Those mean the same thing. And that line is the total of all the capital expenditures, including maintenance capital expenditures. So if Chipotle's line says $200 million, and I don't know any better, I'll use $100 million for their maintenance capital expenditure. Now, if I go to the 10K for Chipotle, I can find one of the 10K years, 2015, they wrote out what their capital expenditures actually were. Turned out it was $57 million. So if I have that number, then I'm going to use that number to determine what the owner earnings are for Chipotle. You're nodding. This makes sense.
Yeah, I'm a little perturbed by the, I guess. So like the way you taught me was that if I didn't know, I couldn't have a reasonable guess, reasonable estimation at the maintenance capital expenditures, then I didn't understand that company well enough. And now you're saying use a default 50%. And it, I mean, I get why you're saying that because you want to just like run the number, but
right. I want to run the number. That doesn't let me off the hook for what I taught you.
Like not a great out because I don't want to give myself any outs.
Well, fair enough. And by the way, when I'm talking about knowing the company well enough to figure out what the maintenance capital expenditures are, you can know a company really, really well. And if they don't disclose that number.
Oh, you're not going to know it. Totally. Yeah.
You're not going to know it.
No.
And so what you need to know is 50% a pretty reasonable guess? Because we're going to default to that. Or is a better guess 80%? Or is a better guess 20%? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In other words, just from knowing the company. If you don't feel competent to make a good guess, then you probably don't know the company well enough. Or you don't know the industry well enough, perhaps.
I mean, now that I'm even saying that, I think in real life, it's always such a giant black box of unknowable information that I always end up. Well, I mean, I find like all the info I can find in the annual report, and often they won't talk about maintenance ever, but they'll talk about growth a lot. And so usually what I do is try to subtract those sorts of expenses and come up with something. And I know that that's still not probably just maintenance because there's probably stuff they didn't mention, blah, blah, blah. But that's how I usually do it. And it's still very much like, all right, I guess that's good enough.
and that's right. Ultimately, you're doing, all right, we're in the ballpark here. And that comes from understanding the business well enough to be knowing that you're in the ballpark here. And second, that you know that our pricing technology here, our pricing strategies are to give us a big margin of safety price to purchase so that if we have gotten this off somewhat, we still have a margin of safety.
Very much. Yes. Agree.
Okay. You guys, if you enjoyed this video and you feel it was valuable in teaching you more about how to invest, hit the like button and please share the video with your friends. And if you want more investing content, subscribe to my channel. And don't forget to click the button on the screen. We got a free gift for you. Thanks again for watching.